poor single dad let a strange girl stay for one night, unaware she was a millionaire's daughter. Hello everyone. Before we begin today's story, I have a small favor to ask. Please hit subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you never miss our channel's new videos. It is quick, free, and the best way to support us in bringing you more dramatic stories. Your support means the world to us. Where are you watching from? Drop your city or country in the comments below. Thank you very much. Now, let us return to our main character. The night air in the city was thick with rain, a steady downpour drumming against rusted rooftops and flooding the cracked pavement. A narrow street lamp flickered weakly, struggling to push back the shadows. Jake Miller pulled his worn jacket tighter, his boots splashing through shallow puddles as he guided his 8-year-old daughter Lily home from the late shift at the diner. He was exhausted, his body aching from double shifts at the warehouse, but his little girl's hand in his own gave him the strength to keep moving forward. They reached their small apartment building, its brick walls chipped and its windows fogged with moisture. Just as Jake reached for the door, he noticed a figure across the street. A young woman, no older than 22, stood shivering beneath the broken awning of a closed corner store. Her hair was soaked through, plastered against her cheeks, and her thin blouse clung to her trembling frame. She hugged herself tightly, eyes darting as if searching for an escape from the storm. Jake hesitated. He could walk inside, close the door, and focus only on keeping his own child warm and safe. But something in the way the young woman's shoulders shook, something in the desperate way she looked at the empty road, made him pause. Lily tugged gently on his sleeve and whispered, "Daddy, she looks really cold." Jake crouched down to Lily's level, brushing wet strands of hair from her face. "Sweetheart, sometimes people end up out here because they have nowhere else to go." He glanced back at the young woman, who now leaned against the wall as if her legs might give out. Jake's conscience burned. He had almost nothing himself, barely enough to cover rent and groceries, but he could not ignore the sight. He called out across the rain, "Miss, are you all right?" His voice carried through the storm. The young woman startled, turning toward him. Her lips parted, but no sound came out at first. Finally, she shook her head and whispered hoarsely, I do not have anywhere to stay tonight." Jake looked down at Lily. The child's eyes were wide, full of empathy. She gave a small nod as if urging her father to do what was right. Jake sighed deeply, then motioned toward their door. "Come on. It is not much, but you can get dry inside." The young woman blinked, clearly surprised. "Are you sure?" I do not want to be a burden." Jake gave a tired smile. "No one should be left out in this weather. Come on, before you freeze." Inside their cramped apartment, the air smelled faintly of detergent and old wood. The wallpaper peeled in places, and the couch had long since lost its shape, but it was warm. Jake handed the young woman a clean towel, while Lily ran to fetch one of her oversized sweatshirts. The girl offered it shyly. "Here, it will help." The young woman's eyes softened. She took the sweatshirt and slipped it on, the sleeves dangling far past her hands. For the first time, a small laugh escaped her lips, quiet and disbelieving. "Thank you, both of you." Jake nodded and gestured toward the couch. "You can rest there tonight. We do not have much, but at least it is safe." She sank onto the couch, clutching the towel around her shoulders. For a moment, the storm outside seemed to fade. The room was silent except for the steady ticking of a wall clock and the hum of an old radiator. Jake watched her carefully, sensing that her story was far more complicated than she let on. But he did not press. Not tonight. Tonight was about kindness, about giving shelter when the world had turned its back. As he tucked Lily into bed, Jake glanced once more at the young woman lying on his couch. She had already drifted into an uneasy sleep, her face softened by exhaustion. He whispered to himself, "Whoever you are, I hope tomorrow is better for you." But Jake had no idea that the girl he had let into his home on a stormy night was not just another stranger. She was the daughter of one of the wealthiest men in the city, and her presence in his modest apartment would change his life forever. The storm had passed by morning, leaving the streets damp and shining under a pale gray sky. Jake woke early, as he always did. His body trained to rise before dawn, after years of hard labor. He rubbed the stiffness from his shoulders, glanced toward the couch, and saw the young woman still sleeping. Her chest rose and fell gently, strands of hair spilling across the pillow Lily had tucked under her head. For a moment, Jake felt a strange quiet in his chest, as if the world had slowed. Then reality pressed in again. Bills, rent, and the constant weight of survival. In the small bedroom, Lily stirred, rubbing her eyes before padding into the kitchen in her socks. "Daddy, is she still here?" she whispered. Jake nodded. Let her rest. She must have had a rough night. He poured water into a dented kettle and set it on the stove. The cabinets were nearly empty, just half a box of cereal, 2 slices of bread, and a jar of peanut butter. He sighed. It would have to do. While Lily ate at the small table, Jake studied the stack of envelopes on the counter. Past due. Overdue. Final notice. His stomach tightened. He had lost his last steady job at the construction site 3 weeks ago when the company downsized. Since then, he had picked up odd shifts at the warehouse, carrying crates until his back ached, but it was never enough. Rent was due in less than a week, and the landlord had already warned him. He reached for the frame propped on the shelf above the sink. The wooden edges were chipped, but inside was a photo of himself and Lily taken 3 years ago in the park. Lily's smile in that photo was wide and carefree, before the world had begun to close in. Jake ran his thumb over the glass. "I promised you better, kiddo," he whispered. "I am still trying." From the couch, the young woman stirred. She sat up slowly, blinking at the light that streamed through the thin curtains. Her voice was soft, hesitant. "Good morning." Jake offered a faint smile. "Morning. There is not much, but you are welcome to have some cereal." She hesitated, then nodded. "Thank you." Her eyes moved across the small apartment, the cracked wallpaper, the sagging couch, the second-hand furniture. She seemed to take it all in, her expression unreadable. Lily hopped off her chair and placed a spoon and bowl in front of the guest. "Here, you can have mine. Daddy always says we should share." The young woman smiled, a warmth flickering across her tired face. "That is very kind of you." She accepted the bowl, her hands still trembling faintly from the cold of the night before. Jake watched the exchange, a knot of emotions tightening in his chest. He wanted to ask her name, where she came from, why she had been standing out in the rain alone, but something told him not to push. She looked like someone carrying her own storm, and he knew what it was to carry burdens unspoken. After breakfast, Jake bundled Lily's backpack and walked her to school, the young woman trailing quietly behind until they reached the corner. She stopped there, her voice low. "You do not have to explain to me. I will not stay long. I just needed one safe night." Jake studied her for a moment, the damp wind tugging at his jacket. He saw the faint trace of fear in her eyes, the same look he had seen in men who had lost everything and had nowhere left to go. He nodded slowly. "Everyone needs help sometimes. Just be careful." She opened her mouth as if to reply, then pressed her lips together and simply nodded. As Jake walked Lily the rest of the way to school, his mind churned. He had enough problems of his own, but somehow, letting that stranger in had reminded him of something he had been close to forgetting, that kindness was a form of survival too. Still, the weight of overdue bills, the threat of eviction, and the uncertainty of his next paycheck pressed on him with every step. By the time he reached the warehouse for his shift, Jake's back already ached just thinking about the hours ahead. He rolled his shoulders and forced himself forward. For Lily, for the roof over their heads, for the promise in that photo frame. But deep down, he wondered how much longer he could keep pushing before it all collapsed. And he did not know that the young woman he had given shelter to was already beginning to weave herself into the very fabric of his life, in ways that neither of them could yet imagine. That evening, the apartment smelled faintly of dust and warm bread, the kind of scent that lingered after a long day. Jake returned from the warehouse with his shoulders slumped, his palms raw from hauling boxes. He placed his lunchbox on the counter and looked toward the living room. The young woman was still there. She had cleaned the space, stacking Lily's scattered toys neatly in a basket and wiping the old table until it shone in the lamplight. Lily sat cross-legged on the floor, pencil in hand, her notebook open. The young woman knelt beside her, pointing gently at the math problems. "Try it this way," she said softly. Her voice carried a patient rhythm, the kind Jake had not heard since Lily's mother passed. Lily's brow furrowed, then her face brightened as the numbers clicked. "I got it," she exclaimed. Jake paused in the doorway, watching the scene unfold. He was used to returning home to silence, to the weight of responsibility pressing on his chest. But tonight the room carried laughter, small and tentative, yet real. The young woman noticed him and rose quickly, brushing her hands against her jeans. "I hope you do not mind," she asked for help. Jake shook his head slowly. "No, I do not mind." He glanced at Lily, who was still grinning proudly. "Seems like you are good at explaining things." The young woman lowered her gaze. "I used to help my little cousins with homework. It feels familiar." She hesitated, as if she had said too much, then busied herself folding the blanket on the couch. Dinner was simple soup stretched thin with bread, divided 3 ways. Jake felt the embarrassment burn in his chest as he set the bowls down. "It is not much," he muttered. The young woman shook her head firmly. "It is more than enough." She took a bite, then smiled at Lily. "Your dad works really hard, does he not?" Lily nodded solemnly. "He always does, even when he is tired." She leaned against Jake's arm, and for a fleeting second, the young woman's eyes softened with something like longing. Later, when Lily had gone to bed, Jake found the young woman standing by the shelf, staring at the chipped wooden photo frame. The picture inside showed him and Lily in the park. Lily, no older than 5, perched on his shoulders with her hair flying in the wind. "You two look happy," she whispered. Jake joined her, his gaze lingering on the photo. "That was before things got hard. But I keep it there to remind me what I am fighting for." The young woman traced the edge of the frame with her fingertip. "She is lucky to have you." Jake exhaled slowly, unsure how to respond. Compliments felt foreign, almost heavy. He shifted the subject. "I still do not know your name." For a heartbeat she looked caught, as if the question reached deeper than it should. Then she answered quietly, "Sophie." Jake repeated it under his breath, testing the sound. "Sophie." She gave a faint smile, but her eyes carried shadows he could not read. "Thank you for letting me stay. I will find somewhere else tomorrow." Jake wanted to argue, to tell her she was welcome a little longer, but the words stuck. Instead, he nodded. "Do what you need to. Just know, you are safe here tonight." She turned away, pretending to adjust the blanket, but he saw her shoulders tremble slightly. When Jake finally lay down in his room, the photo still rested on the shelf, but now the image of Sophie's haunted eyes stayed with him too. He did not understand why, but he felt that she carried a story as heavy as his own. And though he had promised himself not to take on more than he could bear, a part of him wondered what it would mean if she chose to stay. Outside, the city hummed with restless energy, neon lights flickering across cracked sidewalks. Inside, in a small apartment where hope was scarce, a seed had been planted. It was fragile, unspoken, but undeniable. And it was only the beginning. The following morning arrived sharp and clear. The storm swept away, leaving the city glistening under a pale Sunday. Jake had just returned from dropping Lily off at school when he noticed Sophie by the window, her face tense as she peeked through the curtains. She looked as though she expected something, or perhaps feared it. Jake set down his keys. "You all right?" he asked. Sophie jumped slightly, then forced a smile. "Yes, I just thought I heard something outside." "Oh." Before Jake could answer, the sound of heavy footsteps echoed in the narrow hallway outside their apartment. A knock rattled the door, firm and deliberate. Jake frowned. Few people ever visited him, and certainly not at this hour. He opened the door cautiously. 2 men in dark suits stood there, their expressions cold and controlled. Behind them, a sleek black car idled by the curb, its tinted windows gleaming in the morning light. One of the men scanned the apartment with sharp eyes, then fixed his gaze on Sophie. "Miss Sophie, your father has been worried sick. It is time to come home." Jake turned to Sophie in disbelief. She froze, color draining from her face. I can explain," she stammered. The second man stepped forward, pulling a polished umbrella from his arm. "We are under strict instructions to escort you back immediately. Your absence has caused complications." Jake's chest tightened. He looked from the suited men to Sophie. "Father? What are they talking about?" Sophie's lips trembled. She met his eyes, her voice barely a whisper. "Jake, I am not who you think I am." The men did not wait for further conversation. "We will take it from here," one of them said briskly, reaching for Sophie's arm. Jake stepped between them without thinking, his jaw set. "Hold on," She is not going anywhere unless she says so. The first man gave him a flat stare. This does not concern you, sir. But Sophie pulled her arm back before either man could touch her. Stop. I will go with you, but only if you let me say goodbye. She turned toward Jake, her eyes brimming with something heavier than tears. I never meant to lie. I just needed to breathe, even for one night. My father. He is not the man you think he is. I am his daughter, yes. And that makes me someone you should not have trusted. Jake felt the floor tilt beneath him. A billionaire's daughter had been sleeping on his couch, sharing soup at his table, laughing with his little girl. He wanted to deny it, to laugh at the absurdity. But the men's presence, the car waiting outside, and the look in Sophie's eyes left no room for doubt. Why not just tell me? Jake asked, his voice rough. Sophie shook her head. Because if you knew, you would have treated me differently. And for once, I wanted someone to see me, not my father's money. The suited men grew impatient. Miss Sophie, the car is waiting. She wiped quickly at her cheeks and whispered to Jake, Thank you for the kindness. I will not forget it. And then she walked past him, her figure small against the towering men who escorted her into the waiting car. Jake stood frozen in the doorway, the chill of betrayal seeping into his bones. Lily's laughter from the night before echoed in his mind, but now it was laced with confusion. He shut the door slowly, the apartment suddenly colder, emptier. On the shelf, the chipped wooden photo frame caught his eye. It was the one thing still steady, still his, in a world that had just shifted. He whispered to the silence, What did I just bring into our lives? Outside, the car drove away, carrying Sophie back to the world she had tried so desperately to escape. But inside Jake's chest, questions burned. Who was her father, really? And why had she been out there alone? The answer, he would soon learn, was far more dangerous than he could imagine. Jake could not sleep that night. Every time he closed his eyes, he saw Sophie's face at the doorway, her whispered words echoing. I wanted someone to see me, not my father's money. The truth gnawed at him. He had let a billionaire's daughter into his fragile world, and now she was gone, swallowed by the life she had tried to run from. The following week felt heavier than any before. Jake worked longer shifts at the warehouse, his body sore, his spirit hollow. Lily asked about Sophie every evening, her innocent eyes wide with confusion. Daddy, is she coming back? Jake would shake his head and say, No, sweetheart, she belongs somewhere else. But even as he said it, doubt pressed on his chest. One late evening, as Jake left the warehouse, a black car rolled to a stop at the curb. The tinted window lowered, revealing Sophie's father. His presence was chilling, his suit immaculate, his eyes sharp and cold. Jake Miller, the man said, his voice smooth but edged with authority. I appreciate your hospitality toward my daughter. But I must advise you to forget she ever entered your life. Jake stiffened. She is an adult. She can choose for herself. The man's lips curled into a thin smile. You have a child. You rent an apartment in a building I own. One word from me, and you will lose everything. Is that what you want for your little girl? Rage surged through Jake, but he forced himself to stay calm. Threatening me will not make her love you more. The man's expression hardened. Love is irrelevant. Control is what matters. Sophie's future is already decided. Stay away, or you will regret it. With that, the window slid up, and the car pulled into the night, leaving Jake standing in the rain with his fists clenched. At home, Jake placed the photo frame back on the shelf after Lily had gone to bed. His reflection stared back at him from the cracked glass. He whispered to himself, You can take my job, my apartment, whatever you want, but you cannot erase what happened here. Across the city, Sophie sat in a gilded dining room, her father's voice droning about alliances and contracts. But her mind was far away, back in a small apartment where laughter had felt real, where soup and bread had tasted like family. Her heart ached with the memory, even as she remained trapped in the gilded cage her father built. Both Jake and Sophie carried the weight of that week, the taste of kindness, the sting of betrayal, and the shadow of a powerful man determined to keep them apart. Neither of them knew it yet, but the choice between power and love would soon push them toward a breaking point. The days that followed felt like walking through a fog, Jake worked, ate, and slept, but every thought was shadowed by the warning Sophie's father had given him. He tried to push it aside, focusing only on Lily, but the threat hung over him like a storm waiting to break. One Friday evening, as Jake was leaving the warehouse, he noticed a group of workers huddled around a notice board. Their voices were sharp with anger. Jake pushed through and saw the sheet of paper pinned to the board. His name was on it. Effective immediately, his position was terminated. No explanation, no severance, nothing. Just a line that cut him off from the one paycheck keeping his family afloat. Jake stood frozen. He already knew the reason. Sophie's father had followed through on his warning. That night, he sat at the kitchen table while Lily colored quietly in the corner. His hands shook as he opened another past-due notice from the landlord. The apartment was slipping away. He glanced at Lily, her little body hunched over the paper, her lips moving as she hummed to herself. The innocence of it pierced him. When the knock came at the door, Jake almost ignored it. But the sound was soft, hesitant, nothing like the heavy fists of the landlord. He opened it, and there she was, Sophie. Her hair was pulled back in a loose braid, her clothes simple, but her eyes carried a fire he had not seen before. "Jake, I had to come. Please, let me explain." He stepped aside, torn between anger and relief. She entered, her gaze sweeping over the room, the empty shelves, the unopened bills on the table. She reached for the photo frame on the counter and held it carefully. "He did this, did he not? My father. He wanted to punish you for helping me." Jake's jaw tightened. "You knew he would come after me, and you still let me get involved." Sophie's voice broke. "I never wanted this. I just wanted one night where I was not his daughter, where I could be myself. And then you and Lily showed me what family feels like. I cannot walk away now, not when he is destroying you because of me." Jake turned away, running a hand through his hair. "Sophie, you do not belong here. You have everything. And I can barely keep a roof over my daughter's head." Sophie shook her head fiercely. "That is where you are wrong. He has money, but I have nothing. No freedom, no real love. You gave me more in one night than he has given me my entire life. That is why I am here. I want to fight back, Jake. But I cannot do it alone." He looked at her then, really looked at her. The fear was still there, but so was determination. A strength that mirrored his own, the kind forged by surviving hardship. The room was silent except for the tick of the wall clock. Jake finally spoke. "If we do this, there is no turning back. He will not stop until he crushes me." Sophie stepped closer, her voice steady. "Then let him try, because for the first time, I am not afraid of him. Not if I am standing with you." In that moment, the seed of resistance took root. Jake realized this was no longer about a stranger he had let into his home on a rainy night. This was about justice, about protecting Lily, about claiming a life built on truth, not fear. And as Sophie stood before him, holding the chipped wooden frame with Lily's smiling face inside, Jake felt something shift inside him. For the first time in years, hope returned, not fragile, but fierce. The following days turned into a quiet war. Jake searched for work wherever he could, hauling bricks at a construction site for half the pay he used to earn, cleaning floors at a local diner, anything that would keep food on the table. His back ached, his hands were blistered, but he refused to quit. Every morning he whispered to himself, "For Lily," and kept going. Sophie was never far from his side. Though her world had been polished and rich, she proved she was not fragile. She rolled up her sleeves and worked beside him at the soup kitchen, where she had begun volunteering, scrubbing tables, and serving meals to strangers. People whispered when they recognized her face, the daughter of the powerful real estate magnate, now standing in a line of servers with an apron tied around her waist. Sophie did not flinch. Instead, she smiled at the children, encouraged the weary, and handed out bowls with the grace of someone who had finally found purpose. One evening, after Lily had gone to bed, Jake found Sophie in the kitchen stacking books she had borrowed from the community center. She was scribbling notes furiously in the margins. "What are you doing?" he asked. She looked up, determination in her eyes. "If my father can build an empire from cruelty, then we can build something from compassion. A place for families like yours. A hub for people who have been forgotten." Jake leaned against the doorway, watching her. The fire in her reminded him of the promise he had once made to Lily's mother before she passed to never stop trying, even when the world was heavy. But Sophie's father was not silent. Rumors spread that he was pushing city officials to shut down the soup kitchen and bulldoze the block where Jake's apartment stood. It was the same old tactic: crush the weak to prove his power. One afternoon, as Jake carried groceries up the stairwell, he found a notice taped to his door. Eviction within 30 days. He crumpled it in his fist, rage boiling inside. He stormed into the apartment, pacing. "He is trying to erase us, Sophie. He wants me broken, so you will run back to him." Sophie stepped forward and placed a hand on his arm. "Then we fight smarter. He is strong because people fear him. But if they see the truth, if they see who he really is, he will not win." Jake searched her face. She was trembling, but not from fear, from courage, from resolve. That night, as Lily slept curled under her blanket, Jake and Sophie sat at the table with the chipped wooden photo frame between them. It was no longer just a reminder of the past. It was a promise of what could be. The fight against her father was not just about survival anymore. It was about justice. About giving Lily a world where kindness was stronger than fear. Jake tightened his grip on Sophie's hand. For the first time, he believed they might actually have a chance. The night of the exhibition arrived with a nervous electricity in the air. The community center had been transformed into a small gallery, walls lined with photographs of fathers and daughters from every walk of life. Some images showed families laughing in kitchens, some captured quiet moments in parks, and others displayed weathered hands holding tiny ones with fierce tenderness. Sophie had organized it all, pouring herself into the work as if her heart depended on it. Jake stood near the back, adjusting the collar of the only clean shirt he owned. He felt out of place beneath the soft lights and hushed conversations, but when he looked at Lily skipping happily from frame to frame, his chest swelled with pride. On one wall hung a large print of the old photo from Jake's shelf, the one of him and Lily in the park. Lily perched on his shoulders with her hair flying wild in the wind. The frame was new, the colors sharpened, but the memory remained the same. When Sophie stepped onto the small stage to address the crowd, the room fell silent. She wore a simple dress, nothing flashy, yet she carried herself with a quiet strength. "This exhibition is called Fathers and Daughters," she began, her voice steady but full of emotion. "It is a celebration of love that cannot be bought, of bonds that cannot be broken. Tonight, I want to honor one father in particular." She glanced toward Jake, her eyes glistening. "A man who reminded me that kindness is greater than wealth, and that true leadership begins at home." Murmurs rippled through the crowd. Some recognized her immediately. Cameras flashed. Sophie did not flinch. She continued, "Yes, I am the daughter of Robert Sinclair, a man many of you know as a powerful figure in this city. But what you may not know is that his power is built on intimidation and silence. Tonight, I refuse to be silent. I choose to stand with the people who showed me what real family means." Gasps echoed through the hall. At the back of the room, Sophie's father had entered, flanked by two of his men. His face was a mask of fury. He moved toward the stage, but Sophie lifted her chin and met him head-on. "You told me love is irrelevant, Father," she said, her voice carrying through the hall. "But I have seen the truth. Love is the only thing that makes life worth living, and I will not let you destroy it." "Oh!" Jake's fists clenched at his sides, ready to step forward if needed. But the crowd reacted first. People applauded. Some shouted words of encouragement. Sophie's courage had sparked something larger than herself. Her father froze, his power shaken in a way money could not repair. The spotlight no longer belonged to him. It belonged to Sophie, to Jake, to every family in that gallery who knew the weight of sacrifice and the strength of love. For the first time, Jake felt that the battle might truly be turning in their favor. The gallery slowly emptied as the evening came to a close. The photographs still glowed under the soft lights, but the real picture lingered in the hearts of those who had witnessed Sophie stand against her father. Outside, cameras continued to flash. Reporters shouted questions, but Sophie did not falter. She walked down the steps of the community center with Jake on one side and Lily on the other, her hand holding tightly to both. Her father had left in silence, his face carved with anger and defeat. He had built his empire on control, but tonight his daughter had stripped him of it. He could tear down buildings and cut off jobs, but he could not erase the truth spoken aloud in front of a crowd that now believed in her. For Jake, it was the first time he felt that Sophie's world of privilege and his world of struggle could collide and not collapse. Later, in the quiet of the apartment, Lily climbed into Sophie's lap with the innocence only a child could carry. "Will you stay now?" she asked, her small hands gripping Sophie's dress. Sophie kissed the top of her head, her voice breaking. "Yes, sweetheart. I am not going anywhere." Jake set the chipped wooden frame on the table between them. This time it held a new photograph, taken at the exhibition earlier that night. It was the three of them together, Jake, Sophie, and Lily, captured in a moment of laughter that looked like hope made visible. Jake turned the frame in his hands, then looked at Sophie. "I do not have much to give," he said slowly. "But what I do have is real, and I want to spend the rest of my life proving that to you." Sophie's eyes filled with tears, but her smile was radiant. "Then let us build it together. Not with his money, not with his power, but with love." Jake reached into his pocket and pulled out a simple silver ring, one he had saved for years without knowing if he would ever have the courage to use it. He knelt, his voice steady even as his heart raced. "Sophie Sinclair, will you marry me?" Her breath caught, and then she laughed through her tears. "Yes, Jake Miller, 1,000 times yes." Lily clapped her hands and bounced in her seat. "We are a family now," she shouted, and in that small apartment, surrounded by peeling wallpaper and second-hand furniture, a new chapter began. Not written by wealth or power, but by choice. By the decision to love, to protect, and to stand for what was right. For Jake, the man who once thought he had nothing, and Sophie, the woman who once thought she had everything but love, the truth was finally clear. Together, they had found the only riches that mattered: family, justice, and a future built on hope.